Hello everyone, my name's Nica, and I'm back to give another recap from our third session from the Becoming Anti-Racist in the Community webinar series led by Susan Burton. Now, this webinar series was created out of our need to become an anti-racist community in order to truly live out our purpose of becoming Christ in the community. And we spent the first two webinars focusing on transformed people and transformed relationships. We examined how racism and white supremacy is embedded and ingrained into all of our lives, including into our interactions, our actions, our behaviors, and our relationships. And now turning to our third and final session, our focus was transformed conditions. We went from identifying how we can become anti-racist in our individual lives, and then we turned to how we can influence creating anti-racist conditions, knowing that many of our systems are designed to create racist and racially disparate conditions. And there are so many systems that must be shifted or even completely uprooted in order for us to create the transformed conditions we need to truly reflect beloved community. And for this session, we focused on one: the school-to-prison pipeline. The school-to-prison pipeline is a process that essentially drives students out of the classroom and funnels them into the criminal legal system. This discussion began by looking at the status of our schools currently. There are school and local police on campus, armed guards, metal detectors, strip searches, surveillance cameras, and so many other tactics that make schools today look starkly similar to prisons. Harsh school policies mimic the criminal legal system. We saw how the policies implemented in schools, like zero tolerance, school police, referral to juvenile courts, were also mirroring policies like stop and frisk, or mandatory minimums, or the war on drugs. In addition, we saw how the rising rates of out-of-school suspension are actually mirroring the rising rates of incarceration in the US. These policies, along with the presence of police on school campuses, create a direct line between schools and prisons. They push students out of the classroom, which only worsens these students' conditions and in no way supports their growth as students. And these kinds of policies result in situations like students being arrested for scribbling on a desk or playing music from their phone, or even a kindergartner who was arrested for throwing a temper tantrum. And then we had to acknowledge how this pipeline directly targets and disproportionately impacts Black students, Indigenous students, students of color, LGBTQ+ students, and students with disabilities. These students are much more likely to be punished and are punished much more harshly than their classmates for the same behavior. For example, 70% of school-related arrests involve students who are either Hispanic or African American, as identified by the police. We began to think about the ways that this pipeline impacts students even when they are outside of the school system. When the school-to-prison pipeline is mapped, you can see how it passes children from one institution to another, from school to the police, to juvenile justice, to jail, to prison, to even a felony record. And then even after incarceration, this history bars individuals from housing, employment, public assistance, and voting. And it all started at school. So from there, we had a conversation about how we can disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline, how we can change the cycles of abuse and end the passing of children from one institution to the next. And so Susan posed this question: what changes in policies and funding allocation can we make to disrupt and change the school-to-prison pipeline? And our group came up with a long list that included things like creating supportive and safe spaces for learning, equitable funding for schools, universal health care for families, training teachers in de-escalation, or taking the profit out of prisons. And after we came up with this list, Susan brought up another table that showed the stark difference between what our students need, the things like the list that we came up with, and how we are currently spending our tax dollars here in the US. And I think this ending part of the conversation is what really inspired me, because when we began this journey together weeks ago at the start of the webinar series, a really common phrase I heard was, I really want to do more than just the reading and the learning, but I'm unsure of what exactly to do. And to know that we went from that to now in this session being able to list as a group the changes and initiatives we want to commit ourselves to and commit ourselves to supporting in the future. And I think that really helped me to see how through these conversations, we have really been able to progress on this journey of anti-racism together. And I'm, for one, really excited about the ways that we can continue these conversations together as we discern how God is calling us to become anti-racist in the community.